This is an exclusive presentation of WOWO 1190 AM and 107.5 FM, Unholstered.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Unholstered. My name is Kayla Blakesley. I'm one of your hosts here on Unholstered, and I'm sitting alongside my co-host, Sophia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sophia Rosales-Gatina. I am the law enforcement side of this show, and I am a captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department, so welcome.
She's the law enforcement side. I'm the local media side. We have both teamed up. We've joined forces to share and tell all of the stories that don't often get told when it comes to law enforcement, and particularly when it comes to the Fort Wayne Police Department. Sophia, I always look back on the Unholstered podcast, which, by the way, you can download any episode of Unholstered anywhere you download a podcast. But Sophia, I look back on our most downloaded episodes, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I'm always surprised by the topics that are most downloaded. And clear back from like 2-3 months ago, our episode on impaired driving just like went through the roof on our podcast page. Not really sure why, but it did. So I kind of felt like going into the summertime and just coming off of the 4th of July holiday, that it's maybe important to revisit the topic of impaired driving.
I agree. And I think so, obviously kudos to everybody for really wanting to know information about drinking and driving. I don't know if that's good or bad, if we're drinking a lot more than we should, or we want to know information so we can do it safely. So I'm going to go with the positive side on that.
I like it.
We're downloading information to do it safely. But we brought back Lieutenant Mays because he was on the show to begin with impaired driving. And we're going to talk about impaired driving. We're also going to talk about some other subjects too in terms of impaired boating, because I know that a lot of people around here go to lakes and we want them to be safe up there and make sure that no accidents happen that shouldn't happen. And we're also going to touch on a little bit of the impaired driving as it pertains to marijuana, because I know we have a lot of Indiana people that go to Michigan and partake and then come home, and we want to know what you need to do here in Indiana, because we are not a legalized state at this point.
Well, let's just start here, Tony. When we say the words impaired driving, does that just mean drinking, or how do you define impaired driving?
The impairment is anything that lessens your ability to drive or act in, for lack of a better way of putting it, a normal fashion. Your reaction times are going to be slower. Your decision making is going to be slower. Things like that, and anything that you that you put into your system, alcohol, drugs, whatever, have a tendency to impair you to some degree. And the more you partake alcohol or drugs, then the more impaired you're liable to be. And the thing is, you don't have to be above the legal limit, that 0.08 for alcohol, let's say, to have signs of impairment. You can start showing signs of impairment as low as 0.05. It kind of depends on how novice of a drinker you may be. There are some people who may wake up with, at a 0.08 because that's just their lifestyle and you wouldn't know it. So the impairment part of it, it's gonna, like I said, affect your reflexes, your decision making, and your ability to handle a situation as maybe you normally would.
What other things? So are we just strictly talking alcohol and drugs? Are there any other categories of impairment?
A drowsy driver, somebody who has worked a double shift or recently changed their work shifts and their sleep cycles are off. And a person who is sleep deprived who's behind the wheel will exhibit the same kind of symptoms as an impaired driver by either alcohol or sedative type narcotic drugs. So just being tired, being fatigued, and getting behind the wheel can have the same effect.
I tell you what, we were driving home from the 4th of July holiday. My husband and I were visiting family near Lima, Ohio. And I swear on the way there and on the way back, we ran into all kinds of, and I'm going to call them impaired drivers. Again, I couldn't tell if people were tired, if they were drunk already at 11 a.m. I sure hope that wasn't the case. But there was one driver that we were behind. I swear we were going like 18 miles per hour. Following this person. We couldn't pass him yet. We finally got in a passing zone and did pass the car. But to me, is that a for sure sign that you're getting pulled over if you're only going like 18 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour speed zone? I was like, I need to ask Sophia that.
Asking me all these questions. Yes, that's a good way, because not only speeding an issue, but actually going way under the speed limit could be a sign of impaired driving, because some drugs slow your capacity down. So you think you're doing, A when you're really doing B. And sometimes, and I want to really point this out, that I know people always think it's illegal drugs only, but prescription drugs that are given to you by prescription also cause impairment, and you shouldn't be driving if you're taking certain medications. And on the medicine bottle, it does say, do not operate heavy machinery. Your car is heavy machinery. So I just want to point that out. We're not talking just illegal drugs. We're talking prescription drugs as well, because those can be just as deadly for people on the road as illegal drugs.
But it's like going 18 in a 45 mile per hour speed zone. Is that, are police officers allowed to pull someone over for that? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because the law would be that, anything, like if you see the posted highway, let's say I-69, for example,
Sure.
You'll see that it's a 65 mile an hour zone, which we all know is kind of suggestive. But
You said it, not me.
reality is what reality is. There are some areas that you'll see, minimum speed limits. And so if you're going below that, you're going to get our attention. You're, if nothing else, creating a traffic hazard because people are not anticipating somebody that slow ahead of them, unless they've got, like the proper warning, flashing lights
Sure.
or triangles, the slow-moving vehicles.
This driver did not. Let's put it that way.
But yeah, if you got somebody who's obviously driving that slow, whether it could be an impairment issue, it could be a medical issue, we don't know until we pull them over. And that's the one thing we want to make sure is that the bottom line is they're safe and the rest of the motoring public around them is safe as well. So yeah, you're going to get our attention and we're going to pull you over.
In a scenario like ours, should we have called the police, or what should we do when you're like coming up on this person who's going at a solid 18 miles per hour in a 45?
Yeah, that would have been a time to make a phone call to the police, just like you would if someone was running off the road and repeatedly running off the road. It's the same thing. If nothing else, we're just going to check on them, making sure everything's okay. Because sometimes, and as some people get older, they have a tendency to drive way slower than what, like Tony said, is what something people are expecting, and they can cause traffic accidents doing that. So we just want to make sure they're okay. And sometimes it's hard because as I have older parents too, when comes the time when you need to pull that ability to drive away from your parent.
And we see that a lot.
Yeah.
Really?
We see that a lot. Where there's families will have those issues of what do we do if, and I don't want to be the bad guy in the family to make that decision. So what can you, police officer, do? We've had calls. It's like, is there a form you can fill out? Is there something? And actually there is.
Is there?
There is. There's
No
a form.
kidding.
There is a form that can be filled out. And we've done it on behalf of family members and attached copies of crash reports where the Bureau of Motor Vehicles will say, hey, you need to go in and get medically evaluated to see whether or not you still have the faculties with which to drive.
Well, I could see that going over like a lead balloon, though.
Oh yeah, it's
hard.
It's not a good position to be in, and
That's the thunder in the background for those of you who can hear it.
and family members struggle with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to struggle with it with my father. It's not a good position to be in. That's the other side of all of that is what's behind the scenes of a medically impaired individual.
Well, let's talk about just being impaired in general, especially when you said, 0.08, which is the legal limit, right, in Indiana.
It is.
But what's 0.08 for me is not going to be the same as you, Tony, or you, Sophia.
Yeah, and that goes into your drinking practice, your drinking habits. Somebody whose body has accustomed itself to maybe more alcohol over however long of a period of time that they've been an active drinker. I have seen people in investigations that they test twice the legal limit, and I'm looking at them, it's like, I'm shocked because you
can't even tell that they're impaired.
You can't tell.
Like, really?
Physically.
There are some things. There are standardized field sobriety testing. Some things, little hints of it may pop up.
Like what?
Their balance and coordination.
Okay.
You've seen, if you watch any of the TV cop shows and they're walking the line, there's a specific manner with which they're supposed to do it. We describe and demonstrate for them that the way we want them to perform that walk in the line, it's 9-step test. And sometimes they may have just little hints of the heel isn't touching the toe with every step that they take. They don't count every step out loud as they should. But some of those, you total them all up to get your level of impairment. And some people who you look at them and thinking, okay, they're barely an 08, they're barely an 09, and then they test a lot higher than what you think they are. It's because their bodies are used to that amount of alcohol in their system, and I don't know if it's medically correct, but their bodies reach that equilibrium of how they function. And I know of people who wake up and have a mimosa, have a screwdriver, have a Bloody Mary for breakfast. That gets them back to that equilibrium area where they feel they need that. Like we might need a cup of coffee in the morning. That's what they need to get their day started. And so seeing somebody who's, the level of impairment is going to be different based, like I said, on your history of alcohol use. I'm a lightweight, and I know it.
Same.
And
and I know it.
Really, if it really comes down to it.
And so it's like, if you pace your, if I may start with a drink at the beginning of a meal session, and I may nurse that thing halfway through and finish off with water the rest of the time, because I know, not just from a professional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, no, it's not for me. I mean, I enjoy it. I have my favorite drink,
sure,
but it's not like I'm going to go out with friends and hit 3 or 4 or 5
and
of those.
if you do, Tony, that's what Uber's for, right?
Right.
If I can remember how to dial Uber, that would be the problem. But for me, you'd find me curled up on the floor in a corner somewhere.
Which is still better than drinking and driving.
Which is still better. It is.
I was lucky enough to go through the process for a recruit class, drinking and having them test me. So I knew how many drinks I had to what I ended up being. And I remember at the end of that, and I only went at 08. So the bare legal, minimum for drinking and driving. And I remember feeling so horrible. Like I went home and I went right to bed. And I'm like,
at the legal limit of
0.08. I am not a heavy drinker. I do like to drink, but I don't drink a lot at any given time.
And similar, when I was going through the initial training to be a breath test operator for the department, we split the class up. Half of us drank one day, half of the other half drank and tested. And there's mathematical formulas, which I won't get into, but it's like based on how much I weighed, how much alcohol I would consume in that period of time should get me about a 0.13, which is what I was supposed to be.
That's what you had to get up to?
That's what my test limit was.
Man.
That was my test subject limit. And we were in a large auditorium setting. And I remember my seat was in the middle of like the third row from the front. And I don't remember much about getting to the outside aisle other than I kicked almost every chair getting there. I remember waiting in the hallway thinking, I got this, and was trying to practice my 9-step walk and turn in the hallway on the lines on the tile, and I kept banking into the wall. It's like, it didn't seem like a lot at the time until you experience it. And then it's like, okay, that was an eye-opener.
Yeah. What is that sobriety field test? So it's the 9 steps, and again, I think of the cops TV shows. Is it the finger on the nose?
Well, there's 3 things in the standardized field sobriety test. There's horizontal gaze nystagmus, which is an involuntary movement of your eyes.
Okay.
Everybody has it.
Okay.
You can't control it. It is, there are people who may have had some traumatic brain injuries.
I say I got a lazy eye, so I don't know.
That have it. It'll show without any alcohol or drugs in their system if they've had some type of brain injury. In general terms, though, it's an involuntary movement. We check vertically. We check horizontally. I'm doing this like people can see my hands.
I can.
we do it vertically and we do it horizontally. And the more of an impaired substance you have in your person, it can be drugs and it can be alcohol. There are some drugs that will also show up in horizontal gaze. Your eyes will they'll twitch kind of back and forth. And the more you've got on board, the more exaggerated that twitching becomes, so we can see it. And we can see it at what's called an angle of onset when we reach a certain point where we know that, if it onsets before this, the higher it is, the farther out you go, the lower it is.
Okay.
So you've got the horizontal gaze. You've got the 9-step walk and turn, which we talked about.
And this is one foot in front of the other, right?
You start with your left foot on the line and your right foot.
Hold on to the table. That's not a good sign.
Already, Kayla, already. Wow.
For example, like you're wearing flip flops. I would give an individual the opportunity to take those off and do it.
Or heels or anything that's going to affect your balance.
It is much, and there are some people who are, that will have done it in construction boots, and it's like, these are kind of heavy. I'm not used to it. Well, take them off.
Yeah.
Do it in your bare feet. Give them every ample opportunity to show me that I'm wrong, that you're not as impaired as I think you are.
And you have to count each step, then, right?
You look down at your line, your hands stay at your side, and you count each step out loud. When you get to the 9th step, it should be your left foot that's still on the floor. Then you pivot in 3 short steps to your left, going back, and that's the 9th step. And there are clues that we look for with that. They're not counting out loud. They raise their arms. Right. They have to reach for their, where we are in a controlled area.
I just got up and nailed it.
Impaired people don't follow directions well.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha. That's the whole point.
And that's the other point of it.
Because, as you're going through there and people like to get all funny and fancy and, I can do this, and they start, and then they mess it up completely. And the whole point is, like, impaired people just don't follow directions. Yeah. And
they forget.
Yeah.
They forget what it is you told them or the order you told them in. And the third one is it's a one-leg stand. Whichever,
so you don't do the nose? Is that
that's
false?
for no? Well, there's a more in-depth testing that includes the finger to the nose. It's another one that's it's called Romberg 30, which is you just basically stand there, kind of at attention, close your eyes, tilt your head back a little bit, and you estimate however you feel like doing 30 seconds. And usually as people are doing that, you'll watch them and they'll kind of start doing this weeble wobble kind of look.
What's it called?
A weeble wobble look?
No, the Romberg 30?
The Romberg 30. It was a test device designed by this doctor. And basically you stand there and they start out pretty well. And then the longer it goes, the more they try to either compensate in their mind for what they think is happening, but then they kind of start to wave back and forth, or you'll see them kind of circle as they're standing there. And things like that. So there's a series of this battery of tests.
And what's the one-leg stand?
The one-leg stand, you stand with your feet together, hands down at your side, and we asked some
Kayla's doing this right now.
Some
not very well, I might add.
questions of, do you have, are you feeling okay? Do you have any problems with your inner ear? Do you have any congestion that's putting pressure? Because the station tubes, if you've got an earache or something, that can mess with your balance and things like that. So we want to make sure, basically, kind of a head to toe inventory. Do you have any problems with your hip, your back, your knees, your ankles, anything that would cause you to not be able to do this, or that would cause you pain while you're doing it? And then we have them, their hands are at their side, and
now Tony's going to demonstrate.
Hands are at your side, and then whatever foot you choose, you raise that about 6 inches off the floor, and you point your toe straight ahead. Not up in the air, straight ahead. Hands are, again, down at your side, and while you're looking at
I'm a yogi, so I got this.
Yeah, well, I was a cheerleader back in the day.
Yeah.
You count out loud 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and you keep counting like that until I tell you to stop.
Oh, jeez.
If you feel like you're going to lose your balance before I tell you to stop, and you put your foot down, if I have not told you to stop, you pick that same foot back up and resume counting from where you left off.
Okay, fair enough.
And that's where some of the times it messes people up, because they'll get, usually if they've got impairment, they'll usually somewhere about the 10, 11, 12, 13 mark. They start to wobble and they put their foot down, and then they pick back up, and then it's like, I realized I've done something else, and it's like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and they try to get to 30 real quick.
Yeah.
And they try to compensate.
So is that what it is? A 30-second hold is what you're looking for?
It's roughly a 30-second hold. And sometimes it'll take them forever to get to 30. Some of them will just, they'll put their foot down and go, no, ain't happening. And they know. And it's those type of things, which is kind of a reality check for them that, that they can't, they've got some impairment.
Maybe I am impaired.
Yeah, I can't do something
I would like
simple.
everyone to know I just did it for 30 seconds.
And I'll even tell some, I'll have young individuals that are going, I can't do, you've been practicing. It's like, dude, I can see 60 from where I'm standing.
Yeah.
I'm twice your age, and I'm doing it. So it can be done. It's just easier if you're not impaired.
So then how does this translate then? You brought up boating, Sophia. I mean, it is lake season. We have tons of people driving up to the lake every weekend. Same rules apply for operating a boat while impaired?
It's a C misdemeanor for your first offense if you're operating a motorboat. We're not talking rowboats. The classification is if it's a motorized, includes jet skis. So a motorized unit, including sailboats, if they are under the power of a motor, like getting into port or pulling out, or if the winds aren't conducive to operating the sail. If it's a motorboat, it's a C misdemeanor, and then it graduates similar to a DUI charge with an automobile if you've got a prior. If you've got serious bodily injury, or if it causes a death, it'll raise to a level 6 with serious bodily injury, and it'll raise to a level 5 felony if you cause a death while you're impaired operating your motorboat.
So they're the same kind of standards as you are with a motor vehicle, because they are just as dangerous. Think about especially this July 4th weekend. I saw a lot of people, a lot of friends were at the lake, and you just see like the sandbars are just full of people, full of boats, people out on the sandbar. Imagine if someone drunk runs through that entire group of people. It's the same as you do with a vehicle. It's the same dangerous concept.
And even if you take the motorboat out of it just for the safety practice of somebody, what you don't want to be, you don't want to be swimming. If you've had too much to drink, because you lose, if you go underwater, there are people that will lose where the surface is.
Yeah, they're disoriented.
They become that disoriented. They get out too far. They get twisted around, and they don't realize where shore might be or how far they've gone out. So even if you got a boater who's all by themselves and in a canoe or a kayak or something like that, and it were to capsize, your sense of recovery, even if you're a trained, you've been kayaking or canoeing for a long time, if you're what to do in the event of a capsize, you introduce drugs or alcohol into that, and bad things can happen. You lose your sense of orientation. Where is up? What do I got to do? How do I release myself if that's the case? All those things. You go into that panic mode. You lose track of what it is you're supposed to be doing.
What about, so for example, we're talking about the lake. My family, we were up at the lake over the weekend. We have some friends who have a place on Coldwater Lake in Michigan. So there was a lot of conversations going on about marijuana. And because I kept saying to my husband, I wonder how many people out here, because it's legal in Michigan, I was like, man, I wonder how many people are operating a boat right now and they're just stoned out of their minds. Because we had my little girl, we were out on the boat, and I didn't like it. It actually made me uneasy because of the large number of people that were out there. And I just am like, hey, any of these people could be high right now.
Right. Mm-hmm. So smoking marijuana is quote unquote legal in Michigan. Driving a boat while smoking marijuana or impaired, just the same as a car. So you treat it like you would alcohol, right? And people always think, well, you're safer driving marijuana or smoking marijuana and driving than you are drinking. I'm like, no. That's not the case. And there are studies that prove that. And I mean, I think people have this fallacy that marijuana is so much more better for you than alcohol. And as time progresses, I think we'll see a lot more, because the marijuana of today is not the marijuana of my time growing
70s?
up. Yeah, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
I hear all these people, I'm not eating GMO corn, but you'll do GMO marijuana.
Right.
All the marijuana now is genetically modified, because as you go into these stores, you see like 20, 30 different brands, and they all kind of do different things for you, apparently. I don't know. I'm not
Talking
Not
from
a
personal
marijuana
experience, Sophia.
yeah, no, not me.
But they have a target audience,
Yeah.
or
Yes,
a
absolutely.
target customer base of and I'm not a smoker of either venue, but like a cigarette smoker, there are those who like menthols versus non-filters,
that's a good way to put it.
and
That's a
things
good way
like
to
that.
put
So their target customer base, they want something mild, or they want something sweet, or they want something that's got to be a little heavier, or it's and like Sophia said, they're genetically or chemically manipulating these to get that fine of what it is that they're looking for, to appease to a mass customer base.
But a good rule of thumb, though, is same rules apply with marijuana as alcohol.
Stay out of the car.
Even in
stay out
Michigan,
of the-
Indiana,
stay out of the boat.
wherever.
Yep, stay behind the wheel of a car. Stay out of behind the wheel of a boat.
Alcohol's legal. What you do with it may be
Correct.
illegal.
Yeah.
Same thing.
I did not anticipate getting the leg workout that I got today, Tony, after we bring you back in from my standing on one leg. I can't even believe we're already out of time. It happens.
Wow, that was quick.
I know. I'm like, it
Every
happens every
episode's so
time.
quick.
My right leg is a little sore because it was shaking there for a hot second. But I appreciate you coming back. I know we're having fun and we, have laughed a lot. But I still feel like it's a wildly important topic, especially right now with summertime, lake season on us. It seems like there's more parties, there's more drinking, more drugs.
It does. And I'm glad we can provide this information. I'm glad we have people like Tony that are so
Me too.
knowledgeable about this. Extends far beyond my knowledge because he's really honed in on the drinking and driving and traffic stuff, or I've kind of gone a different way with my career and things that I've done. So I'm glad I can bring these people on that have this. So if you have any questions, you can always text us at the text line. We'll get them answered. And if we need to bring on Tony back for another show to answer all the questions, we will do that. So this is your show to our listeners, and let us know where you want us to go.
Tony could be our third host here.
Yeah.
As it is your second time back, Tony.
Apparently people want to know all about the drugs and alcohol and driving.
Apparently. If you have missed previous episodes like the one we've done on impaired driving before with Tony, or any other previous episodes of Unholstered, you can download us anywhere you download a podcast. Your town, your team, your topics. This is Unholstered.
Thanks for listening to Unholstered. Be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. And remember, you can listen every Saturday morning at 10:30 on WOWO 1190 and 107.5 FM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.